Tom, that was quite a face as we went live. Hey,
Camera
everybody.
shy.
There you go. Well, it's us again. It's Wednesday at 8 p.m., and it's time for Gun Cranks Live. Thanks for joining us. We're starting to get quite a following here in spite of our enormous lack of talent.
I'm
Brent.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you weren't already aware, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Weed. I'm joined by Tom McHale, the editor of American Handgunner magazine, and our boss, the publisher at FMG Publications, Roy Huntington. So,
hi, Mom. Yeah.
Today, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of holsters. That's all we're going to talk about. We're not going to reference anything else going on. We're just going to have a little fun and talk about the good stuff in holsters. So I'm going to start this out by saying, first of all, a holster is mandatory equipment for a handgun. Whether you're just out target shooting or especially if you're carrying a pistol for defensive reasons, you got to have a holster, and you shouldn't scrimp on that particular piece of it. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of folks do. I'll give you a good example of what not to do. You see this? It's an inside the waistband holster that I bought, and it's a major national manufacturer. And I carried this very briefly. And the first thing I discovered among all the other problems is it's awfully flimsy, as you can tell. And even if you're non-law enforcement, you will learn, or we've learned over the years, that when guns come out and are used in critical situations, a lot of times there's no shots fired and you need to put the gun away. Sometimes you need to go hands-on, you need to open a door, you need to protect your family. So having a holster that you can put the gun back into easily is pretty important, and that doesn't fill the bill. I don't think even with a lot of Viagra it would fix that problem. So there's one good example of what not to do as a holster. So
that's what we need is holster Viagra, by golly. I knew there was a business opening somewhere.
There you go. That's our retirement plan.
Ay.
So Roy, I'm sure you've seen a lot of crazy stuff in holster land.
Well, I wrote the handgun leather column in Handgunner for about 10 years, and that was the time where it was mostly leather. It was Kydex was being introduced, and everyone lost their mind over that. But I think there's a couple things you need to remember. First of all, do you need a holster? First of all, yes. Obviously, just because you buy a gun, if you're not going to carry it or something, maybe you don't need a holster. But as Brent says, if you're going to the range, if you're in the field, if you're carrying a gun, for goodness sakes, you do definitely have to have a holster of some kind. And we can talk about the specifics of that. But somebody told me something one time, and I think it was Clint Smith. It was at the beginning of a class, and he said, you think of a holster like you think of the sling on your rifle. He said, if you have a rifle or a shotgun, especially a defensive gun, you should have a sling on it because you need to put it someplace when, like Brent said, when you're helping your kids out the front door or holding down the bad guy or something. And that I think people forget that. They think they feel really good. Oh, I got my defensive gun in my hand. But now suddenly you have to put the fire out, or you have to open the car door, or you have to pull the bleeding guy away from something. And it's like, what do I do with my gun now? And so that's why I think you holding up that piece of floppy garbage that you had there, although they were hugely popular and they probably still are, I think that's very indicative of the fact that you can't holster one-handed. And that's why most successful modern day inside the waistband holsters tend to be reinforced around the mouth of the holster just for that reason. There you go. Yeah, like that one.
Mitch Rosen, I just did a review of this. If leather could be called mil spec, Mitch Rosen is it. This stuff is
tactical leather, right?
It's tactical leather, and I think you could probably use it as an impact weapon. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is just truly at the top of the heap,
You guys need to back up though, because you're talking about one thing. I mean, I think and Roy, nothing personal, but I wrote a whole book on holsters. So
yes, he did.
Just saying.
Yeah. I was going to get a shameless plug in there for you, but you beat me to it. So.
But you beat us to your own shameless plug.
No, we can talk about that for an hour or so later. Yeah. But I think you got to think of three things. Why do you need a holster and why do you need a good holster? One, it protects the trigger from moving, period. Yeah. That's number one. Number two, it keeps your gun attached to you, to your body. Like Brent, that one you held up, that thing's gonna fall out,
Absolutely.
Unlike with a proper holster, right? You turn it upside down and it's gone. Wrestling, fighting, running, whatever, you've lost your gun. And part three, or reason number 3 is it keeps your gun oriented in a consistent position. So if and when you need to go use it, you not only know exactly where it is, you know exactly how it's oriented. So when you grab it without looking, it's going to be there and ready for you. So,
You know,
I mean,
a lot
those are
of
kind of
women,
the 3
oh,
criteria that I would look at for any holster choice. Right?
it's a good point, because I know a lot of women, we've addressed this many times through the years, take a gun, drop it in their purse. And you know, they always say, oh, well, I know where it is and stuff. But what you just said is so important, because the grip gets flipped up, down, sideways, backwards. You reach inside, you can't find it. The same thing happens when you put a gun in a coat pocket. We've all had that happen. You stick it in your pocket to take the trash out, and you reach in later, you realize, oh, the muzzle's now pointing up.
Yeah.
Well, where's the weight in this? Right.
Yeah.
It's just a semi-automatic pistol. All the weight is right here when it's loaded. So guess what's going down, right?
Yep.
Well, you know, and that's why I have this little 380 that I carry in my pocket all the time. But that you're right, the shape of that is pocket shaped, and so it tends to keep it vertical in your pocket. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Very important.
And Tom makes such a great point about retention. We can tell, I'm sure we can all maybe tell a story, but I definitely can, being in a foot pursuit and things are getting dicey and you kind of check to see where your gun's at, make sure it's there, and oh, it's not there. That's not a real good feeling.
You know, can I revert just one quick thing? I was in a roll around fight with a guy one day on duty in my duty holster, an old Judge holster. Remember the old ancient Bianchi Judge holsters, break front holsters? It's a wonder we're still alive. But fight's all over, and I feel the tap on my shoulder, my side, and I look over, and there's this little kid about 8 years old. He's got my revolver, holding it by the grip, and he goes, "Sir, this fell out." And it was like a little true story, absolutely true story.
Hey, miracles like that can happen. I many years ago, I was wearing one of these compression undershirt, you know, with the holster pockets right here. And this was an early model before they got real aggressive with the Velcro and everything. And if you think about Kydex weight plastic on slippery plastic shirt material, hold that thought for a second. I was actually wearing this under a regular t-shirt with a regular crew collar, not something like this. I bent down to the ground to pick something up just from a standing position. And at the time I was carrying a Glock 32 loaded. So it was reasonably heavy. That thing ejected from this pocket through the collar and onto the ground at warp 17. Oh, no lie. I mean, I'm sitting there bent over. I didn't even feel it go. It just went like that.
Oopsie.
I'm looking at my Glock on the ground in front of my face going, oh my gosh, that's...
He was in line at Jack in the Box too. So there was a pregnant pause in conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw out the discussion question that we'll try to keep this to under like 45 minutes. Kydex or leather?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. For me, it's going to be my
position. Yeah.
For me, I'm leather in the winter because I live in 300% humidity here in South Carolina. So I do find that in the hot and sweaty months, the leather gets a little sticky. Not just comfort for me, but for the gear inside. So, drawing a gun or a magazine isn't nearly as smooth, when it's 98 degrees outside and everything's soaking wet. So I kind of switched to Kydex in the summer.
No, I think you're right. I think I look upon leather as like analog and Kydex is digital. And the reason for that is because the leather holsters, like this is a Bianchi holster. The link will be down below, but it's very simple. It's one piece of leather. You can see with a couple belt loops. So it just goes on, your belt feeds behind it. And this holds 100 different kinds of guns. I mean, virtually, if it's an auto pistol short of a Desert Eagle, it'll fit in this comfortably. And that's, I think, one of the beauties of leather is it is a little more versatile sometimes in those situations. But I think what Tom said was very important. I find the Kydex tends to be more snicky, and more precise. And so especially all my range holsters are Kydex holsters, because you're in and out. They stay where they are. They click when the gun goes in. They pretty much don't wear out. But I think leather, it's almost like good wine and a nice leather holster. And so I oftentimes I'll carry leather just for the mood more than anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like your Rosen holster. You know, they're just so pretty.
Yeah.
I just want to have one.
I feel better, faster, stronger, smarter, and wealthier when I wear this holster.
I think maybe it's just a class, a classy pairing. This is a DeSantis holster. This is for my Walther PPKS. So they just, it just seems to work, right?
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what though, they do wear out. And I know I see holsters, on readers, they'll send me a picture of a holster that they've had, hey, I've had this holster for 20 years. It's like, really, you should have thrown it away about 18 years ago. They're soft, they're wear out, the snaps break, and these people keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And that's crazy. I want to show one more thing, which is a lot of people don't carry ankle holsters. It's a little hard to see in this light, but this is a surgical elastic. It's got sheepskin on the back. It's called a Renegade. It's made by the Wilderness Tactical. The link will be down below. And that's probably the world's most comfortable and secure ankle holster. But that's a mode of carry that people forget about. They think holsters and they think hip carry. But, if you've got a small frame revolver or a small to medium size auto, ankle carry is a real viable option for you. It's a good idea. So
or if
Brent,
you're in the car a lot, you spend a lot of time sitting, in a vehicle. It's very accessible that way.
But don't wear it with shorts, okay? Just would you do me that favor? Because I've actually seen that in open carry pictures.
Are you serious?
I know.
I was going to say, but you at least have to have black socks and sandals on, right?
Well, yeah.
I know.
So it matches. Right?
It's like I saw that picture of the people at Walmart, and they've got what's the bag when it's like a urine bag that they clamp to your thigh, right? And so he had that on.
Delay?
Yeah, with shorts on, and I thought, you know what? That's what you would look like if you wore ankle holster. So just don't go there. So
don't go there.
And then now let's talk about how much money you should spend for a holster. Mr. Man who wrote the book about holsters, talk to us about
expert.
A lot, and I don't mean that flippantly. So think about it this way: the best gun in the universe and all the training mean absolutely nothing if your holster fails because it's cheap or old or worn or whatever, right? I mean, would you put synthetic used grease fuel in a Bugatti? No, you put premium gas in it.
Brent would.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I wouldn't now. See, that's where I think I'm qualified to talk about a lot of this stuff. I've made every single possible mistake you can humanly make. I'm the perfect example of a bad example.
That box of holsters, we wrote about it in Handgunner not too long ago.
Yeah.
If you have a box of holsters, that's good. That means you've been trying different things out.
Yeah.
That's what we always talk to our classes about. If you don't have a box or a drawer full of misfit holsters, that you go to the store and you think, this is the ultimate holster, and you try it and it's just not. Okay, so you try something else, or you use them so much, you love them to death, they go away. So anybody that's been shooting for a while really should have that drawer of holsters someplace. Mine's a bag out in the garage.
Well, and it varies by person, right? I mean, what's ultimate for you may not be for me, and that's okay,
Exactly.
Because I'm a lot more fit than you are, more fit and handsome, and you start adding those factors together.
And he wrote a book too.
And I wrote a book, yeah.
But I'm meaner and more bitter. So,
fair point. So, yeah.
We've seen the people who they'll spend $800 or $1,000 on a new SIG, and then they turn around and they ask the guy at the gun store, how much is a holster? And he'll say, well, there's this $25 nylon shapeless holster. There you go, like that.
Yep.
Or there's this $100 one, made by fill in the blank company. And they almost always will buy the $20 holster.
Yeah.
I remember in some classes I went to at Thunder Ranch and Gunsight and places like that. And invariably there'd be some Nimrod show up on day one with a $12, sewn Chinese holster. And of course, after being suitably, bombarded with ridicule, usually day two, he'll be showing up with some borrowed holster that some guy, gave to him. But let's talk about off-body carry, because people always talk about holsters. And I don't think any of us here is going to say, you need to buy this holster. That's not what this is about. I think this is about just think about it. Ask your friends, ask trusted people, read our magazines, because we talk about holsters a lot. But just be thinking about what your needs are. And it's almost like computers and software, because people used to always say, remember when the early days of computers, they used to say, what computer should I buy? And
Yeah.
then I would always say, well, what software do you need? And then you buy the computer that fits the software. And so in your own cases, you look at what are your needs to carry, and then you start looking for a holster to meet those needs. And maybe those needs are off-body carry.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll jump right in here with my one invention. This is a holster, and this was designed.
No way.
Yeah, it's even, it's a flexible water bottle. It was designed to meet my needs. A few pounds ago and a few years ago, we used to backpack a lot, and it was hard to carry a firearm because obviously on your hip, the hips, the pack strap is rubbing it. Shoulder holster doesn't work. There's not a lot of good options. And I'm a firm believer you should carry, but you should carry concealed. So I was trying to figure out a way to do this. And it struck me that by taking my water bottle, taking the guts out, and as you can see, there's no water bottle there. I chopped it off, put a piece of Coroplast, and then I've got a foam insert down here in which I stuck a small holster, and that's where my 40 rode on my backpack hip belt.
He's
and
a sneak, huh?
It's exactly what it was.
That's kind of clever.
We actually discussed that for a while, but it was so cool because you didn't run into trouble too often, but every once in a while when you're miles and miles and miles in the backcountry and you run across somebody that's a little sketchy, I'd kind of just keep my hand on my hip, ready to get a drink of water, and they were never the wiser, and my hand was inches from my pistols. So it's not that I'm brilliant. It was just a cool example, I thought, of how you can design things to meet the needs that you have.
Maxpedition has a line of packs that just look like everyday packs like you'd carry your books to school with, and they're intentionally made to not look tactical. But yet they do have easily accessible gun things. Now I'm not the firmest believer in have your gun off your body somewhere, because invariably you'll put your pack down over there and then that's when you need something. But if you're out of options, or like in your case, Brent, I think that made perfect sense. There's also, remember the old Fanny Packs? I actually helped to develop one for Bianchi in the early years. But then everybody started doing it, and then that was like the photojournalist vest. They look down, they go, hey, what kind of gun do you have?
Exactly.
But I think even if you go there, I notice they're starting to come back now. It's just think non-tactical. Just don't be a tactard. I mean, get something that's forest green with, that says REI on it. Yeah.
This one looks a little tactical, but this is a Hill People Gear chest rig, and this is perfect for backpacking and fishing and all that. So like I said, it does look a little tactical, but I always make a kind of I grab my, when I'm talking to people, I get some jerky, or if I'm fly fishing, I pull my fly box out, and most people think, oh, he's just got a chest pack to carry his gear, not knowing there's a full-size Glock.
You're outside
behind
hiking or in the woods. That doesn't look unusual at all.
Exactly.
But Roy, there's another one like you were describing for in-town use. The guys at VanQuest Gear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
they make a whole new, they call it a urban series of packs, and one of their specialties is sling packs that rotate around, quickly and have a dedicated holster pocket too. But the new stuff looks like a Metro book bag, It
does. And have you seen the ones that they look like a tennis racket pack, or they look like a skateboard pack, or I mean, that's made for like if you've got an undercover police unit, they need to get into a building armed. It just looks like a bunch of undercover cops carrying inappropriate backpacks.
A funny story, when we were on SWAT and we wanted to do kind of an undercover type thing in insertion, when we had maybe a trial going down that we needed to be there, but we didn't want to make a big show out of it. I play guitar, so my guitar case had a carbine in it, which, what sense does that make? A guy that looks like me and a bunch of other guys that look like me carrying a guitar and a keyboard case into the courthouse? It really didn't make much sense.
I might buy it.
Okay.
It's the cop jazz band
musician.
Exactly.
You look the part.
Yeah. Now, what do you guys think of these? It's it's hard to see. It's I think the name is Excalibur. It's a Kydex basically clip that goes over the trigger guard, and I know people carry these at holsters. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The reason I have them is if you are going to carry off body in a pack or something that doesn't have a dedicated holster, I like this little bit of added safety that something won't get caught into your trigger guard, a chapstick or whatever, a jerky won't get caught in your trigger guard and have a boo-boo. But these aren't very expensive, and it gives you a little bit of extra peace of mind.
Well, you know,
You're good in your water bottle.
Or in a water bottle carrier. They
Yeah.
clamp. They can secure inside of the pack or your pocket. So when
Yeah.
you draw the gun, it comes off
Mhm.
the trigger guard as it draws. Yeah,
The
there you
little
go.
carabiner link and into the
Makes sense.
so.
Well, you know, a long time ago when I was doing my handgun leather column, I had a reader send me some pictures, and it was a pair of jeans, and it was obvious there were powder burns, and you could see the hole blown out where the jean pocket was. And so I sent him a note back, and I said, you know, tell me what happened here. And he had an old the Kel-Tec P32, the little, you know, pocket P32. He had that carried loosely in his right front pocket, but in that pocket was a Swiss Army knife, one of the little executive Swiss Army knives. And so, but his gun wasn't in a holster, and he was, as he was walking out to a gas pump to pump gas in his car from paying inside when we used to have to do that, he said, I heard a pop. He said, and I felt cool. My leg was like cool all of a sudden, you know. He says, and I couldn't figure out what the noise was. I thought somebody threw a firecracker or something. He says, I looked down and I saw the hole in my pocket. He says, and it dawned on me what had happened. He said, so I just, like, you know, put my hand in my pocket, got in my car, and drove away. So who knows where the bullet went or anything. But he said what he found out though is that the knife had worked its way into the trigger guard. And when he moved, it had actually pulled the trigger and it fired in his pocket. Interestingly enough, he said it cycled and it reloaded a cartridge. And
Really?
the knife was still stuck in the trigger guard. So
wow,
that was like,
he was lucky.
Never for me ever will I put a gun in my pocket.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that raises
requirement one: protect the trigger. Right?
Yeah, you know, that raises a funny observation I never thought about. But in all of the pictures or maybe personal experience you've had where people have accidentally shot themselves, and I don't mean in the leg, in the body, but a discharge, like it's in the holster as they're holstering or in a pocket or whatever, they always do the same thing. They try to act like it didn't happen.
Yeah,
I've seen it. No, everything's fine.
I meant to do that. Yeah.
Exactly. The famous one was the, I believe it was a DEA agent giving the gun safety talk, and he shot himself. He's like, nope, I'm fine. I've got arterial bleeding, but I am fine.
I'm a professional.
He kind of tried to continue on with his lecture too.
Yeah, exactly. People are screaming. And
I have an old.
I mean, that was a negligent thing, but it's so unnecessary. I remember Plaxico Burress shot himself in the leg. The NFL, receiver or tight end, I think he was. He wasn't using a holster at all, and the gun started to slip down his pants, and lunged for it. It's like, stop it from falling, through his pants leg to the floor, and shot himself in the leg.
Well, what are the firearm safety rules? Keep your finger off the trigger. Muzzle in a safe direction, and if you're carrying a gun, the muzzle is going to cross your thigh, or it's going to cross your appendix, or it's going to. So you got to protect that trigger. I have I collect some old classic law enforcement holsters I used to use for photos for my columns and stuff, and I have one. And I'm blanking on the name of it now, but it was a holster that it was a police holster, and it was a clamshell holster that if you put your finger in the trigger guard and push the button, and the whole side of the holster would flip open, right? So, and that was just, in the late 40s, I guess is about when they first came out. LAPD used to carry them. As a matter of fact, Adam 12 used to use that.
Really?
If you watch that, they put their hand on their gun. Push the button, flip, the holster would open up. But so I have one for a 1911, and very interestingly, at the very bottom of the holster, because it was steel lined, there's a perfect 45 caliber hole going right through the bottom of the holster. So things were exciting at some point for some officer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I just thought of another do as I say, not as I do moment. And I don't know if I've written about it in Guns. I've written about it elsewhere. Okay, so setting the scene. We're doing a plainclothes detail. We're taking care of these bad guys. We're out doing stuff at night. And since I'm young and, full of testosterone, I thought I'm not going to use the name because I'm not sure what's politically correct now, but I stuck it in my waistband. That's it. There's various names for that, but hey, we're BA, we're tough. We can carry guns like that. So didn't have any problem that night. Got home and I went to pull my full-size Glock out of my waistband, and it wouldn't come. And I mean, it'd move a little bit, and the more what happened was the slide lock had somehow engaged the waistband of my underwear. There was a tiny tear.
Yeah.
And it engaged that to where I basically gave myself the wedgie from hell trying to pull my handgun. So I got all that sorted out, but I thought, wouldn't that have been wonderful if I'd got into a deep crisis and I'm sitting there pulling my underwear out of my pants? Because, with adrenaline, it would have come. But
that would have scared anybody away.
Well, that's true.
Was underwear hanging from the muzzle of his Glock, right?
And they probably
run, so.
And they probably wouldn't have been clean.
No. If it's not a DA auto, if it's essentially single action, you can call them double action. That's fine. I don't care. But if it's a Glocky, kind of a gun, M&P kind of a gun with no safety, it's just a little flipper safety. You're crazy if you don't have a holster around that.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why actually I like XD pistols, because the genre of XDs with a grip safety. I mean, it does lend you to be a little bit safer in that situation. But before we get too far off topic, though, Tom, I wanted you to talk about. We joke about him writing the book on, but he really did, and I really would like you to tell the listeners a little bit what would they learn if they got your book, because I think it's a good resource.
I think the first thing I would say is we gun people tend to be really binary. Like, this method is great, that method is stupid, period. And I don't buy that at all. We're all different. We all have different requirements. I rarely have to wear a long dress to work, right? So I can carry IWB, but I can't sit there and say, well, you must carry IWB because it's the only correct way. Well, that's easy for me to say, right? I mean, it's a silly example, but it kind of drove how I approached the book. I went through a whole bunch of different carry methods, outside the waistband, inside, ankle, off body, packs, shirts, clothing, underwear, you name it. And instead of saying this is great and this is lousy, sometimes I would say I think it's lousy, but more importantly, I think you have to look at the pros and cons relative to your requirements and lifestyle. So, if you have to carry in an ankle, here are the pros and cons. It's going to generally take you 2 hands to get it out. It's a slower, more awkward thing. It's pretty far out of the way. But if you know that and you recognize the limitations and you consciously think through those trade-offs, maybe that's right for you. I mean, that's just one example, but the whole point is you've really got to look and recognize what you're getting into. I talked about shirt carry earlier. That's a real easy trade-off. It's really, really concealable. If you're in an environment where you absolutely positively have to keep concealed, maybe it's a work environment where it's not illegal but it's frowned upon, maybe that's your only choice. Now, I would recognize I cannot get to it as quickly as I could in other methods. So if I turn a corner and somebody punches me in the face, I'm probably not going to have a lot of success drawing my gun to prevent that, right? That's the cost.
And that goes back to maybe part of holster carry is also honing your situational awareness, like with the ankle carry thing. I think at least with ankle carry, you'd never violate that rule 1 of a gunfight, which is have a gun, so ultimately if you're forewarned, then you're forearmed. And so then, I'm going to duck behind this car and get my gun out of my holster. So
you just have to think, you have to look at the methods, you have to think of the pros and cons, and only then, and this is what I do in the book, only then do you get into the specific gear. So, when we talk about ankle carry, we talk about, a dozen different options, to do that, and pros and cons within those. So you really have to take a strategic, layered approach to how you're going to carry and why you're going to carry.
Yeah. There was one holster we didn't cover, the Brazier holster.
Flashbang.
The flashbang. Do you remember, Tom, at
Are we
SHOT
qualified to talk about that?
Well, no. We almost filmed a piece at SHOT Show, if you remember. I think it was us. One of us was going to model the flashbang, but we decided that might be a little silly. No. Well, sometimes I want to feel pretty.
Well, I think that's a situation, though. Like Tom said, maybe in certain situations that might be appropriate. I don't know.
I can't say, and I'm being serious here. I don't have that challenge. I don't have that wardrobe challenge. I don't have, So.
Well, I've known a couple of women that have to make some pretty dramatic accommodations to carry, because it's exactly like you said, Tom, that they're not committing a crime by carrying a gun, but they would be fired and their career would be instantly ruined if somebody thought they had a gun, but yet they're not going to go to work without one. So that's one of those situations where it may be a little slower getting out, but you're relatively safe that nobody's going to see it inadvertently, and you're going to end up losing your career over it.
It's a spectrum, and the easy way to look at it is kind of speed of accessibility, versus concealment, and it's a seesaw, right? So,
yep.
My wife Susie, when she was a detective, they had to dress nicely in the office and whatnot, and so of course, if you're a woman and they don't really have big belts, if you're wearing a dress skirt or pantsuits or something. So she actually experimented with real lightweight shoulder holster systems, and with a small to medium sized gun, and then balance the other side with a magazine or two. And she found that it actually worked out really well, because she got in the office, she could just take it off, hang it on the chair behind her. She said the only problem was with a woman's lighter weight shirts, it tended to, scrunch the shirts, out, because she's got, silky shirts or that kind of stuff. So, but we didn't talk about shoulder holsters, but I will say I used to carry one a lot, but you have to remember you can't take your coat off. And so, that throws a wrench in things. Yeah. I would say if I had to say one thing about holster carry is that, like, I think Tom covered it very well with the book, and is that, take a hard look at all of the options, but just don't scrimp on quality. That is the thing. Just don't go cheap, because you will regret it.
Hey, kind of semi-related to the quality, we didn't necessarily talk about this directly yet. I like to kind of consider the drop test. Do it with an unloaded handgun, but imagine the extra weight down here. If you put a gun in a holster and shake it and it falls right out the bottom, I know it's easy to say, you guys told some law enforcement stories where you're fighting or subduing a suspect, but reasonable retention applies to the civilian world every bit as much.
Absolutely.
If you're attacked or fighting for your life, you're in vigorous movement. So that needs to stay where it's supposed to stay until you choose to take it out. Even running or jogging with a cheap holster, that gun's going to come out. So think about retention.
There's no worse moment, and I've had one of these, where suddenly there's a gun laying there, or suddenly seen, and there's that 2 seconds where everybody's like,
not a pregnant pause.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. A lot of times we get readers say, "Hey, I have a .38 revolver. What holster should I buy?" And it's just not that simple. Yeah, it's just not that. And hopefully, even if that's all I think anyone's learned from this, is that, we arguably experts. I think an expert is someone who knows more than the average guy. So we might qualify. I don't know. I have the biggest box of holsters that didn't work for me, so that may help a little bit. But I think one thing that I've learned through the years is that there is no definitive answer. And like one of you said, we tend to be, it's good or bad. And this is one of those categories where that's just not the case.
Yeah.
Just what's good for me is bad for you, is good for Brent, is bad for, this other guy. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good point.
Well, great discussion over holsters, the good and bad and the ugly. I think we've all kind of agreed, get a good holster, make sure it serves your needs, and don't be afraid to throw it in the box in the garage. and check out Tom's book. How can people find out about that book, Tom?
The easiest way to find it, well, any of the big booksellers, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, it's available in ebook and print. It's called The Practical Guide to Gun Holsters for Concealed Carry.
Very cool. Well, we hope you're enjoying Gun Cranks. We enjoy doing it, and I think it's kind of starting to take off. We're getting a lot of comments. One of these days we're going to start answering your comments in real time. We do see them, but we're trying to talk. So, we'll try to work that in, but we're having a great time doing it. Make sure you reach out to us. It's editor@AmericanHandgunner.com or editor@gunsmagazine.com, and we'll see your comments. Of course, you can also post here. And most importantly, to make sure this keeps happening, if you enjoy it, share this with all your friends. Let your buddies know about it. We'll be here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Unless the overlords tell us we're not going to. But right now, everybody's pretty happy with this. And I got to point out, well, first of all, I got my COVID haircut. I got no more hair, and you'll notice the beard's gone. I got tired of
Wow.
having a hair. My hair was longer than it had been literally in 20 years. So I finally got it cut. But Tom, I really like your background there. Is that your actual workbench?
Yeah, I'm on rare occasion neat and tidy sometimes, sort of. So that's
Rare
kind of my
occasions.
gun cleaning bench back behind me there.
That's
I think-
a sickness, I think.
I was going to say OCD rears its head yet again.
Clean gun, clean living. You know, it all goes together. So
Let's not get too far with this. Okay. These are on, so, well, we hope everybody's had a good time with us on Gun Cranks, a little bit of enjoyment in an otherwise crazy world, getting together and talking about guns. So hope you have a great rest of the night. And in the meantime, get out there and get shooting. See you guys.
all right.
Bye.
Good night.